Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Astrology of Crime. I hope you're having a nice day. Thank you for joining me. Hello, Boom Her. Thank you for being live with me today. You're leaving in a bit for your girlie to compete in state again. Whoa! Wish us lots of luck. Lots of luck to you and your daughter. Congratulations ahead of time. We'll send you lots of love, luck, and good positive energy. So today we're going to be talking about the Martha Moxley case. This is actually an unsolved murder. I don't claim to know what happened. I don't know. But I think that through astrology, we could glean more insight. And I'm hoping through talking about it, maybe we do shed more insight into the case. And who knows, maybe it can be solved and the murderer can be put to justice for Martha. So we'll talk about the case. It's very expansive. Talk about a rabbit hole. So bear with me here. I try to condense it as much as possible, but it's a rabbit hole. A lot of these cases could really be series, right? This could go on for weeks discussing the Martha Moxley case for sure. So who is or was, unfortunately, Martha Moxley? Well, she was a bright and beloved 15-year-old girl who lived with her parents, Dorothy and David, and her brother John in the affluent neighborhood of Belhaven. And her mother, Dorothy, is the sweetest woman. She actually doesn't hold any anger and isn't even vindictive toward her daughter's killer. I mean, her grace in terms of this is outrageous. She's just the sweetest woman, and she actually can teach us a lot. I mean, we've had people do things to us that weren't nearly as bad, and we probably don't always forgive easily, and she does. She has the grace of God. Hey, Regan. Yes, I think that you'll like it. I think you'll like it for sure. I mean, it's very fascinating. So where is Belhaven? Well, it's in Greenwich, Connecticut. Very peaceful, exclusive community where violent crimes were virtually unheard of. When you hear more about Belhaven, it was a lot of people did drink. It was very alcoholic-y. However, they were rich, and nothing was really a big deal. The cops, in fact, had no experience whatsoever dealing with murder, with a homicide investigation. They were used to picking up drunk drivers and really keeping people out of the community. Key to Belhaven and this case is that Belhaven was guarded by its own private security force. This was a gated community. You would have to go through guards in order to get to Belhaven. So it is an enclosed place. So that tells us that somebody within the community is responsible for the crime, most likely. At one point, I think it was Kobe Bryant's cousin decided to say that two black guys had committed the crime, which was preposterous. I mean, that just would not have happened. They would have been seen and they wouldn't have been able to get into the community because they didn't live there, let alone the fact that they were black, and this is extremely white community. So in any case, it was in the community, most likely. So when did she get killed? Well, Martha got killed on October 30th, 75, the day before Halloween, which was known as Mischief Night, where people would pull practical jokes, toilet paper trees, maybe throw eggs at cars. Nothing really crazy. And Martha was hanging with her friends, and she was last seen roughhousing or flirting with Thomas Skakel. So one of her friends actually saw her roughhousing with Thomas. She had thought that Martha and Thomas were being a little bit too flirtatious. She was a little embarrassed, and she decided to leave. And Martha was last seen roughhousing with Thomas Skakel. So who is Thomas Skakel? Well, Thomas Skakel is the oldest boy of the Skakel family, and he was 17 in 1975. They say that Thomas, when he was 4 years old, he was thrown from a car and suffered traumatic head injuries, which resulted in him being very impulsive, at times violent, going off, being very severe in his behavior. But they attributed this to a brain injury when he was 4, lack of impulse control, etc. So who are the Skakels? Well, the Skakels, their aunt actually was Ethel Kennedy. So their father, Rushton Skakel, his sister was Ethel Kennedy, and that's the widow of Robert F. Kennedy. There are 7 children in the Skakel family. Unfortunately, their mother had passed away at the time of the murder, and they lived with their father. What they say is that after Mrs. Skakel died, the father was a mess, and he was an alcoholic and either absent or just not very useful in terms of keeping the family in line. So the Skakels hired help to rear in the children, but according to reports from one of the governesses at one point, they weren't allowed to discipline the children. So you have all these children, 7 children. The oldest girl, Julie, poor Julie, because she was the oldest girl, the only girl, and the oldest girl, she was sort of left to be the matriarch of the family, which is really, really tough since she was so young. But they were not able to be disciplined. I guess the parents didn't allow them to be disciplined per their hired help. So here are Skakels. You got Rush Sr. He was the one. He's in the back. Well, excuse me. Yeah, Rush Sr.'s here. He's the older man, 51 years old. Next to him is Rushton Jr. He was the most put together, they say, of the Skakels. You have Julie over here in the back. You have here this blonde guy. That would be Tommy Skakel. This would be John. This would be Michael Skakel. We'll find later that Tommy, this blonde boy over here, and Michael, those are the prime suspects in the Skakel family. And then you got David and Stephen, who are younger, over here. So how was she killed? Martha's friend Sheila McGuire found her body under a large pine tree. Martha was lying face down, face and underwear pulled down. However, according to the autopsy, she was not sexually assaulted. She had not been raped. But it was not really well done. Like, they checked her body for semen, but not her entire body. Her face, when they found her, was bruised. Her hair was matted with blood. Martha was blonde, but they thought she was actually a redhead. They couldn't tell that she was actually a blonde. And there were pieces of a broken golf club beside her, and the sharp shaft of that golf club had been stuck inside her neck. It actually went through one side of her neck to the other side, pulling hair along with it through its trajectory. So it was pretty gruesome. This murder weapon, really one of the most fascinating aspects of the case. The golf club that was used to kill Martha was a 6-iron, and it was the same type of golf club that was missing from Anne Skakel's set. So Anne Skakel was the deceased mother of the boys, and this one golf club came from the set of Anne Skakel's. And the set had been passed down to the Skakel's only daughter, Julie. In all fairness, the golf clubs were known to be left around the area, along with other things. And no search warrant, though, was ever issued for the Skakel house. Yes, it was very brutal, very brutal. So the police on the scene first said that the golf club handle was sticking out of Martha's neck. But then they don't have that piece. They don't have that shaft. So what happened to that piece of the golf club? And it would have had the initials of the owner and Skakel on it, and possibly fingerprints of the killer. So we have a very key piece of evidence that just seemed to have gone missing. In 1997, a pathologist reviewed the autopsy findings, and they conflict with the police report. So the police records overlooked the fact that Martha had a stab wound in her neck. And also, with the autopsy, they found out there was blood in her lungs, which indicated that she was still alive when stabbed in the throat. A plausible explanation was that Martha was almost beaten to death with the golf club, and then the killer returned to hide her body. And when he returned, he found her still alive, and he stabbed her with the broken golf club shaft to make sure that she was dead. So, of course, Tommy is questioned. He's the last person to have seen Martha. He tells police that he was with her until 9:30 p.m. that night, and then went back inside to watch a film called The French Connection. And The French Connection, he specified that he was actually watching the chase scene in The French Connection, which we'll go back to, which I think is interesting. Sometimes with these cases, some extra information can actually be found in the lies or the statements of the suspects. So we're going to go back to that French Connection thing. But he said he'd gone back inside to watch The French Connection with Kenneth Littleton, and then he did some homework. And they put him under a polygraph, and he passed, and they just exonerated him, really. They're like, okay, yeah, he's good. Passed his polygraph, which are notoriously unreliable. Usually you hear about polygraphs being unreliable in the sense that they can come off as false positives, meaning the person's lying, but really not. But it can work the other way, too. I mean, if you're really steely, and also you know, if you're not aware of your guilt or you're in denial, in fact, you can actually, I guess, sometimes what happens is that when somebody's doing a polygraph, they will actually put like a tack or some kind of sharp object on their body and puncture themselves with it to sort of set off the machine. And really with polygraphs, the validity of them really, or the efficacy of them are really based on the polygraph examiner, the guy who's running it, because he needs to actually look at the suspect when they're doing the polygraph. Are they squirming? You know, what does their body look like? Are they visibly trying to compose themselves, etc.? So anyway, he passes the lie detector and is exonerated. And who's Ken Littleton? Well, this is the guy who Tommy said that he had watched The French Connection with. Well, Ken Littleton doesn't actually belong to the Skakel family. That day, he actually moved into the Skakels to serve as a tutor. Talk about a really rough first day of work, for sure. Oh yeah, for sure, Regan. You can. I'm sure if you do enough studying, or you can poise yourself. So Ken moves into the Skakels that day, and although he failed several polygraphs, Littleton was never charged in connection with the crime. But it would seem if he failed several polygraphs that he had something to hide. But again, those detectors are not really reliable. So then they decide to question Michael Skakel. Now, Michael Skakel's the younger Skakel suspect. He was 15 at the time, 2 years Tommy's junior. And when questioned about that night, Michael tells detectives that he had left his house around 9:15 and drove to his cousin's, returning around 11 p.m. And detectives believe that Moxley had been bludgeoned from behind around 10 p.m. The police really got tunnel vision in terms of this time frame. They heard dogs barking, a lot of dogs. The neighborhood had a tremendous amount of animals. But in hearing the dogs barking around this time, they determined that she had been killed between 9:30 and 10. But, you know, the dogs can't verify why they were barking. It could have been for any reason, right? So that time frame is debatable. And the police did not see it as such. They just, again, in all fairness to the police, this was their probably one of their first, if their only homicide investigation. They had no idea what they were doing. And there are other issues regarding the police in this case that we will definitely get to. Despite conflicting accounts of his whereabouts that night, he's not further investigated. So even when they actually find out, or they talk to the different people that were there that night, did Michael go back with you to the cousin's house? Some people said yes, some people said no. In terms of the polygraph, they found that one person wound up saying, well, somebody was in the car, but they wouldn't identify who. So there was questions as to Michael's alibi for sure. But he's not further investigated in 1975. And the case goes cold. On January 22nd, 1976, Rushton Skakel had ended his family's cooperation with investigators. So this is the Skakel father. He allowed the police to search the home. But this was very strange. We're going to talk more about this. But the Skakel home, where they found the murder weapon had originally come from, was not incredibly searched. Not searched well at all. In fact, they did a quick search, but they didn't check the laundry machines. They didn't check the drains. They didn't check the garbage. So they gave them ample time to clean up the crime scene. Further, it's preposterous when you hear about it, but the police report says, in regard to searching the Skakel's home, that Julie, oldest Skakel girl, and her father did a cursory search around the house. And the police report says, but they're going to do a more thorough search, and they're going to get back to us with their findings. So the police have the Skakels search their own home for evidence pertaining to Moxley's death. Can you imagine? Like, how ridiculous is that? This is actually in the police report. The Skakels will report back to us when they get around to it, what else was found in the house. So, reason being is that the police literally worked for the Skakels. They worked for them, meaning the police would provide security for the Skakels. They would drop the boys off at times, right? They would also get them out of trouble, which they were in quite a bit. So the police were on the Skakels' payroll. So that's a huge conflict of interest, which even if they don't have any experience, if the police don't have any experience investigating a homicide, common sense would tell you that you don't have the perpetrator's family or the suspect's family searching the house. They didn't even get a search warrant. So obviously something's really rotting in Denmark. Red flag? Oh yeah, it's a flaming red flag for sure. But then there's a little bit of renewed interest in the case in 1978 when Michael is charged with drunk driving near the family's ski lodge in New York. To sidestep prosecution, Skakel's family attorneys work out a deal with police. Michael would go to the Elan School in Poland, Maine, to be treated for alcohol addiction, and the state would not pursue the charges. Now, the Elan institution is a whole other video entirely. So this was in Poland, like Poland Springs, I believe, Maine, and it's very much nothing is around, right? It's pretty isolated area, and there at the Elan Institute was very questionable tactics in terms of handling the children there. For instance, they might be forced to wear a sign, they might be badgered, they might go through times in which they're actually screamed at by each other. I mean, weird things. Abuse. Oh, you saw some firsthand? Yeah, those places were awful. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other episode, really. The Elan Institution, full of abuse. Yeah. So anyway, he does go there to the Elan Institute to get out of jail. And that actually came back to bite them in the ass because he reportedly confessed at the Elan Institute. But anyway, even after that drunk driving charge, things are not moving forward with the Moxley case. But in 1991, something really interesting happens. This incident sparked renewed interest in the case. So in 1991, there's a rumor that floats around that the Kennedy family member, William Smith Kennedy, may have been involved in the rumor. So in 1991, William Smith Kennedy is accused of rape. Highly publicized trial. And Ted was involved in this as well because it was around Easter weekend in 1991. And this woman says that after drinking with her friends and William, that William was walking with her on the beach, and she claims that he jumps into the ocean and she's taken aback, and then outside of the ocean, he comes back onto the land, onto the sand, and that he rapes her. And she presses charges, obviously. So this puts this case back in the spotlight. The rumor that he was involved was false. He wasn't involved in the murder of Martha Moxley, William Smith Kennedy. But what's interesting, what was the purpose of the false rumor that William Kennedy Smith was somehow linked to the murder of Martha Moxley? Perhaps the answer to that question lies in the fact that the woman that William Kennedy Smith allegedly raped turned to him after the alleged rape and inexplicably said, "Michael, you raped me." Fascinating, right? Hey, Carlin, nice to see you. Thank you for joining today. So, fascinating, right? She calls him Michael for whatever reason, which, I mean, Michael's a pretty common name, but maybe that's why his name got called into it. So, Mr. Skakel, Rushton Skakel Sr., he is wanting to cover his family's ass, right? He wants to make sure that since there's renewed interest in this case, that his family stays okay, right? He wants to keep the family name in place, right? So he hires these private investigators, these really top-notch private investigators, and the firm to do research on the case to find out what is known about it. And really, rumor has it that they're trying to implicate Ken Littleton, whose first day on the job as the live-in tutor was on the date of the murder. So the firm spends several years and reportedly over $1 million poring over the case and re-interviewing witnesses. Now, this Sutton report was quite a big deal. Rushton Skakel ordered the report in hopes of exonerating his boys, and it did just the opposite. The Sutton report reported back that there are some condemning circumstances pointing directly at the principal suspects in the murder of Martha Moxley. And who are the suspects? Well, you got Tommy, who was investigated at the initial start of the investigation when the crime occurred in 1975. Then you had Ken Littleton was investigated as well. And now Michael comes into focus. So what did the Sutton report find? By the way, the Sutton report is online, and I have to say that it is delicious. It is absolutely delicious. The intelligence of these investigators, how they were able to provide logic in determining the facts of the case, the possibilities of what happened. It is really outstanding. And if you are interested in true crime, I absolutely suggest you read this. I mean, it's very, very, very long, and it's so expansive and vast that it's hard to really download, but it is delicious. It is phenomenal. So the Sutton report finds that Thomas Skakel, this is the older Skakel boy, disclosed that it was not 9:30 p.m. when he saw Martha outside his house, but actually closer to 10. And also, before he went back inside, he said that him and Martha engaged in mutual masturbation outside his home. But he, for whatever reason, left that out in 1975 when initially being questioned. That's kind of a big deal, right? To leave that out, that he changes the time to a half hour later because he knows that the police think that the murder occurred between 9:30 and 10 when the dogs were barking. And he says that, oh yeah, by the way, we masturbated each other. Left that out, yeah. Now, Michael Skakel tells investigators that he did not go to bed when he arrived home from his cousins around 11 p.m. He tells them that he actually climbed a tree outside of Martha Moxley's bedroom and masturbated. Masturbated outside of her house with the tree outside. And he left that out. Another key fact. So what are both boys doing? Well, they're putting them at the scene of the crime, right? They're putting themselves at the scene of the crime. So if they get tried and people want to know, because DNA is now big, people want to know, well, why is your semen there? Well, that's easy. I masturbated in the tree outside of her window. And then Tommy gets to say, oh, yeah, we masturbated each other before we departed. So they're giving themselves an out to evidence that might point to their guilt now that we have DNA in the 90s. Ken Littleton, a live-in tutor, is suspected of lying, but circumstantial evidence indicates that he did not murder Moxley. Yep, he's now tweaking his story. That is high motivation, I would agree. To climb a tree and yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that just seems, highly implausible and very strange if it's not. So, yeah, somebody's lying, or a lot of people are lying, clearly. So the Sutton report concludes that if Tommy and Michael Skakel were not lying then, when they investigated them, that they're lying now. Or excuse me, if they were not lying in 1975, then they're lying now, or vice versa. Tommy was able to pass at least one lie detector test with his original story, but certain individuals are capable of deception, and the polygraph can falsely identify others who are not lying. So, people also claim that Michael had spoken about killing Martha, or thinking that he may have, at the Elan Institute. There are several people that come forth from the Elan Institute claiming that Michael said that he did kill her. In one instance, I think he tells people allegedly that I may have killed her. I think I killed her. And then he goes to, I killed her. So he does reports say that he had said that he was so out of it that he didn't know what happened. But there's definitely a lot of hearsay that says that he did it. One person actually claims that he said, I'm a Kennedy and I can get away with murder. Paraphrasing there, but he did say that he was a Kennedy and he'll get away with it. If Ken Littleton is entirely innocent, the Sutton report finds, if he's innocent of any involvement in the murder, he certainly has gone to great lengths to make it seem otherwise. So Ken Littleton is seeming very guilty to the Sutton experts, right? But they don't think that he killed her. So, synopsis of what happened next, just a Reader's Digest version. Michael's indicted in 2000 after a grand jury hearing and is sentenced to 20 years to life in 2002. His conviction is reinstated in 2016, but is later overturned by the Connecticut Supreme Court in 2018. In 2020, the state of Connecticut announces that Michael Skakel would not be retried for Martha Moxley's murder. So to retry him is off the table. So he's not going to go and be punished further. He did spend 12 years in jail, which is certainly not enough for murder. But anyway, that ship has sailed. Michael Skakel will not be retried for the murder of Martha Moxley. So here we get to our astrology, folks. Here we get to our astrology. So what's interesting is that the first house in a crime chart pertains to the victim. And we see the ascendant in this crime chart, and it's the crime chart I ran for when she was exactly found, which was the next day after Mischief Night on Halloween at 12:45 in the afternoon when she was found by Sheila McGuire. So the Aquarius ascendant, whenever you see Aquarius or Uranus featuring strong in a chart, we're talking about fastness, quickness, speed. And it usually means quick or early. For instance, in the O.J. Simpson case, you'll see Uranus and Aquarius featuring, and Ron, or was it Nicole, one or both of them had left work early, right? So that featured there. So with Aquarius rising, Martha may have left someplace early, or there was a certain degree of detachment, coldness, right, that she displayed that explains the murder. So if she was hanging with Tommy at the time, she may have left his house early or unexpectedly, suddenly, right? So maybe it could have been he wanted to go further with her. They were playing around. They were flirting. She could have gotten cold, Aquarius, and left really quickly. That's possible. But there's something about speed and suddenness with Aquarius rising, which it describes our victim. So we also look to see that Aquarius rising, what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, right? And Uranus, therefore, is the planetary ruler of the victim. And Uranus is over here in blue. And Uranus in this chart is right next to the sun, right? It's right next to the sun. And the sun in the crime chart pertains to usually a man, or always a man usually, and can pertain to the perpetrator, the sun. So we see Uranus, the planetary ruler of the victim, is next to the sun or the perpetrator, meaning that they may have been together, obviously. If the perpetrator killed her, they're together. But what's interesting is that the planetary ruler of the victim is Uranus, and the sun is representative of the perpetrator, and it's in the 9th house. And the 9th house is very, very visible. The 9th house in astrology rules publishing, broadcasting, expansion, growth, visibility. So here we see that the victim and the perpetrator were visible. Well, who is visible that night? Michael and Martha weren't necessarily visible, right? Not at the last time Martha was seen alive. She was visible with Tommy. They were seen roughhousing by more than one person. In fact, one person got uncomfortable with the flirtatious nature of their roughhousing and let them be because she was embarrassed. So there's a certain visibility here between the perpetrator and the victim. Also, what's interesting, though, which adds to the complexity of this 9th house is a big deal. And we're going to keep going back to this 9th house because the North Node is there. The North Node is like direction, destiny. A key element is this North Node or this ninth house. Now, the ninth house rules physical travel. So usually it's about foreign travel. But as they say, getting drunk is like a poor man's vacation, right? And in addition to actually traveling, it could be traveling of the mind, right? It could be imagination or mental wanderings, which supports the theory that Michael reportedly said at the Elan Institute that, or allegedly at the Elan Institute, he had said that he was so out of it, right? He doesn't know what happened. So that could very well be a ninth house thing. And we're going to get further to that ninth house for sure. Hey, nice to see you. And thank you for the suggestion, AAS. AAS was the one who suggested that I cover the Martha Moxley case, and I hadn't heard of it before. So thank you, because I am now in the rabbit hole. And yeah, I'm reading 2 books about it. I got to drop it because I'm trying to do a case a week. But thank you for the suggestion. It's so fascinating, this case. Hey, Benjamin Elliott, thank you for joining. I'm glad you made it too, Gay Stranger Allied. Thank you. So we see that ninth house is key. Okay, there's a certain level of visibility, and we have visibility per account between Tommy, older Skakel, and Martha, not Michael, right? So they were seen. Meanwhile, this is very interesting too. That ascendant, which rules our victim, makes, obviously, we're going to talk more about the Saturn aspect, that opposition to Saturn, but it also makes a quincunx. It makes a quincunx to Mars. Now, Mars in a crime chart is obviously very important. Mars rules weapons, it rules violence, anger, aggression, and that is key to any crime chart. You want to look to Mars to see what's up. And in this chart, we see that the ascendant, ruling the victim, is at 1 degree Aquarius, and we got Mars at 2 degrees Cancer. Now that makes a quincunx, which is a 150-degree angle. It's really an awkward angle. A quincunx is the struggle to blend. So it's like something has to be incorporated here. It's really awkward. So there's some kind of awkwardness that the victim is experiencing in regard to this crime or around this crime. Now the 5th house is really interesting where that Mars is. So the 5th house is associated with romance, love affairs, dating. Well, who was she dating at the time? Well, she was actually dating this other guy, this guy by the name of Peter, who has an airtight alibi and was miles away from the crime. So it wasn't Peter, wasn't her actual boyfriend. But who was she 5th housing with, right? Who was she romancing with, playing with? That's the 5th house. Play, if you're playing with someone, you're rough housing. That's a 5th house endeavor. That's 5th house. Nothing more than 5th house than wrestling with somebody playful in a flirtatious kind of way. That's very typical of a 5th house relationship, which is really interesting. In terms of Michael, the younger Skakel, well, she had sort of rebuffed his advances, and it seemed as if Martha, if she was interested in anyone, it would be the older Skakel, Tommy. Now, Mars in a crime chart also pertains to the murder victim, and this is really a little bit on the nose. You know, the murder victim, the murder weapon would be from some kind, the victim or the perpetrator's home, right? And that's because Mars is in Cancer. And not only that, but it's interesting that the golf club had belonged to the mother of the Skakel boys. So it's interesting. Did the with that weapon, it's what they call a weapon of opportunity. So it's not like the ideal weapon that the perpetrator would use, but it's convenient, right? The golf club is on the ground. I'm going to grab it. At the same time, Michael did confess, or reportedly, allegedly confessed at the Elan Institute that he did retrieve the golf club from his home and then went looking for Martha. So Yeah. I didn't make that up. No, Carlin's joking with you. So yeah, we have that murder weapon, and it did come from the home, no doubt about it. And Mars can also talk about the nature of the crime. Well, it's Cancer. And what is Cancer? Well, Cancer is hypersensitive, and it's very emotional. And they talk about this crime. It was overkill, right? Now, there's the theory that when you have a crime that is like that is very passionate, frenzied, is what an examiner called it, an expert, a criminologist called it, that it was a frenzied killing. And a lot of people might say, well, this is personal. Not always. Not always. I mean, in Ted Bundy's case, he would go into frenzies and he barely knew these women, right? So it's personal at times, but not necessarily with that person. And what I mean by that is Ted had been rebuffed or abused or whatever by his mother, let's say, the girlfriends that he had, or one particular girlfriend. And sure, when he wound up assaulting these women, he was perhaps triggered, and he was actually seeing, I don't know, maybe he was seeing his mother, maybe he was seeing his ex-girlfriend. But my point is that it's not always personal. It makes sense that it would be, right? But not always. So in any case, this crime was rather emotional, clearly. And it is plausible that the boys, or one of the boys, saw the golf club and was triggered. I mean, the golf club was their mother's. And I mean, it's a very, the whole thing is just so tragic. Not only, obviously, Martha, but even the Skakels. I mean, that whole situation was very, very, very sad. Even before Martha's death, right? So anyway, we have definitely a conflict between the victim, ruled by the ascendant, and the fifth house, play, romance, fun, and that murder weapon represented by Mars, it pertains to home, family, mother. So very on the nose. Now, in a crime chart, I would say the most interesting part of a crime chart is that seventh house. That seventh house. Now, the seventh house describes your perpetrator, and the planets in the seventh house maybe describe the appearance of the perpetrator or give more information about our perpetrator. Now, this is where I get really interested, because we get Saturn in that seventh house, which describes our perpetrator. And Saturn represents authority, its maturity, its restriction, it is caution, right? Think Capricorn. So you could think, and it's Leo, right? It's Saturn and Leo. So there's a certain level of passion that's involved, but it's controlled. So that Saturn right on that seventh house cusp, it's almost like if you were looking at a natal chart, Saturn being on the ascendant. So if Saturn is on the ascendant in somebody's chart, their natal chart, they're going to feel restricted in terms of their self-expression. Positively, they're going to be controlled in a not an overly cautious way, but they're going to be deliberate, they're going to be strategic, they're going to be controlled and very, very most likely poised in their demeanor. So when Saturn is on the descendant, that is going to describe our perpetrator. There's a certain level of control. Now, this is what is interesting. We were told by a criminologist that it was a frenzied killing. That's not Saturn at all. Saturn is not frenzied. So it's very possible that Martha was beaten in a frenzy with that golf club, right? But actually killed via Saturn. And what I mean by that is this. Martha is, let's just say, is beaten with the golf club in a frenzy by this perpetrator. Perpetrator leaves. But then what happens? Well, the perpetrator returns to the scene of the crime to hide the body and perhaps kill her. So remember with that autopsy report, when the golf club, the shaft, was put through her neck, the autopsy revealed that she was bleeding at that time, which suggests that she was alive when that golf club shaft went through her neck, meaning that she was beaten, probably very close to death, when she was beaten by the golf club, but was actually killed when the golf club goes through her neck, taking her hair with it, right? From one side of her neck to the other, right? So it's very possible that the beating of Martha Moxley was frenzied. However, with Saturn there on the descendant, the actual killing of her was controlled and a move of caution, right? So that adds another level to this, right? I have Saturn in my descendant here in this chart, yet we have a very, very frenzied killing. So there's a certain level of deliberateness, caution, and also authority. So it's interesting. Who is the authority in this crime? Really fascinating, right? So let's look at that Saturn further. Okay, Saturn represents maturity, authority, restriction, and caution. Now let's look at our prime suspects. We have Tom Skakel, who is 17 years old at the time. And then we have Michael Skakel, who is 15 at the time. Tommy's obviously older, and he's the boy who was investigated at the beginning of the case. They zoned in on Tommy because he was the last one who saw her alive. It was only until, well, say Michael's drunk driving, or when the William Kennedy Smith case came out and the Sutton report comes out, that's when they zone in on Michael, right? But Tommy was the original prime suspect in this case. But in terms of Saturn, which one is Saturn? Which one is Saturn? Meaning, when we're looking at this crime chart, we see Saturn right here on the descendant. This describes our perpetrator. Who killed Martha? Saturn killed Martha. Something Saturnian killed Martha. That's not to say that she wasn't beaten beforehand in a frenzied state. But who's Saturn here, do you think? Certainly not the younger boy, right? There's another picture. Now, I'm not sure whether or not this photo was taken in 75. Michael does look very young here. I mean, this could have been years prior. But these pictures were put together for whatever reason. And, you know, clearly Tommy's older. And 2 years difference from 15 to 17 is a big deal at that age, right? So it's fascinating that we have Saturn on the 7th, for sure. Very interesting. So what's also interesting is when we want to look for further information about a case, we look to the 8th house, right? Where are their secrets? What's going on, right? What's hidden? What's the truth, right? And when we look at this 8th house, well, we get a stellium, which is 3 or more planets. First, we have Mercury. Now, Mercury in a crime chart, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see Mercury, and that's going to mean 2 people, pairs. And in addition to Mercury usually showing 2 people, it also may represent a neighbor, friend, or a sibling, right? The Skakels were the neighbors, friend, yeah, and John Moxley, the brother, absolutely exonerated. I mean, that's off the table. The brother's not responsible for Martha's death. Then we got Pluto. Pluto is here in this 8th house. Now, Pluto in a crime chart, that's where there's trouble. Big, big, big time trouble. And it rules power or a powerful person. It also pertains to jealousy. And that is what prosecutors suggest. Prosecutors believe that Michael, younger Skakel, liked Martha. Beautiful girl, and Martha was flirting visibly with Tommy. Prosecutors suggest that Michael saw Tommy and Martha roughhousing, flirting, or he learns that they had sex per somebody at the Elan Institute. What they had said, they said that Michael allegedly said that he killed Martha because he saw his brother and Martha having sex. He got jealous, right? So the prosecution is suggesting that Michael sees Tommy with Martha, whom he likes an awful lot, gets jealous, gets put in a blind rage due to this jealousy, and then goes after Martha and kills her, which does make sense, right? I don't know if any of you have experienced jealousy before, but it's sort of it does hijack your values and your personality, right? At times, if you've ever been jealous. Hey, Sonia, nice to see you. Ding, 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 ding. Thank you. Yeah. I think you summed it up. You summed up my working theory quite well. Yeah. Is it possible that Michael beat her in a frenzied panic, went to get Tommy, who thought that they needed to kill her and dump her body? That's my theory. So, yeah, that's my theory. Because that Saturn, that control, that restriction, that responsibility, that finality, right? Saturn there in the 7th. That's what I think. That's my theory, that Michael beat her in a frenzy and then Tommy perhaps finished her off and hid the body, right? Because you got that in there. Saturn's all about responsibility. So, yeah. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah. So, what else do we have here? So, yeah, we got that Pluto there. We have the moon being the co-ruler of a victim in the crime chart. And we also have Venus. What is Venus? Venus is women, right? And women are ruled by Venus, of course. So there's a woman involved here, perhaps, right? There's a little bit more information. So what woman do we have involved? Potentially. Well, the only woman involved in this is poor Julie, really, outside of Martha. Poor Julie being the oldest Skakel girl who became the matriarch of the family, the surrogate mother of the family, once the mother died. She, Julie, was the one who answers the phone when Martha's mother comes looking for her. Have you seen Martha? Julie's the one who goes and talks to Tommy. Have you seen Martha? Julie's the one who winds up saying, allegedly, to Mrs. Moxley, why don't you call the Tyrans, the cousins, right? So Julie is also the one who the police entrust to search the house to make sure that, you know, the golf clubs aren't there, right? Which they were, right? So Julie's involved in this somehow. Not necessarily is she involved in the murder, but clearly she's involved. She's running interference for the Skakels, right? Now, you got to remember, this is a family, right? So we can kind of assume that they're all going to stand up for each other, right? Isn't that a given? Right? So, yes, great Aquarian minds indeed. Yeah. But I love how you put it so eloquently. I've been working on this for a week, but you actually sum it up perfectly. And I had trouble bringing it all together. So thank you for your help. Peter, my suspects are her boyfriend at the time. Peter and the guy, Aldolf. Oh, come on. So her boyfriend, I don't think, okay, her boyfriend was miles away and was with the mother. The guy, the Bryant guy, that whole theory is outrageous. And I'll tell you why. Because remember, this is one of the richest places in the entire world. This is a gated community with security there. Do you think in 1975 they're gonna let two black dudes the night before Halloween, nonetheless, when there's more police on the scene, they're gonna let two black dudes into this gated community and nobody's going to have seen them. No, number one, they're going to actually get access and then they're not going to be seen. No offense. Rubbish. She wrote in her diary, Peter will kill me if he catches me with Tommy. Yeah, I mean, don't we always say that? My mother's going to kill me if I come home late, right? I don't think, honestly, I think Peter lacked a certain, from what I gathered, passion, right? Why would she be roughhouse? Okay, so if Martha is reportedly on multiple accounts roughhousing with the older Skakel, Tommy, I kind of think that there's something missing in Peter and Martha's relationship. And I think that's passion. I think Peter was a great guy. And I think he was sort of almost too nice in the sense that I don't think that, number one, what kind of guy is Peter if Martha is risking flirting, making out with Tommy? Peter obviously is kind of wimpy, right? Or he's not strong, or we can gauge that maybe he's not giving Martha something that she might desire, maybe that passion, that sense of excitement that women can get with dangerous men, right? So if Peter is guilty of anything, it's being perhaps not as passionate or as strong or manly as Tommy, because why would she be with him, right? Yeah, he was very, very far away. In fact, he had said to his mother, I want to visit Martha. And she gives him permission. And for whatever reason, he doesn't take the track there. Yeah, all right. Let's just say it. Peter's a wimp. He's just not. Okay, you understand this, though, right? Like, there's something with guys who are, like, dangerous a little bit. That's kind of exciting. You know what I'm saying? Peter's not exciting. Granted, he's not going to kill someone, which is nice. So, anyway. So, it's very possible that a woman was involved in the hidden aspects of the case. And you got Venus there, so who's to know? Did Julie know what happened? I don't know. But poor Julie, no matter what. No matter what. Yeah, girls like bad guys, right? Exactly. So let's see here. Now, this 10th house is really very important. This 10th house is really very interesting. So the 10th house in a crime chart rules police. And Neptune rules deception, confusion, and even intoxication. So let's just go there in terms of the police. First of all, we have the part of the shaft, the golf club, that was found in Martha's neck is not there, is not found. It's elsewhere. They can't find it. The autopsy sees the wound in the neck, and they don't have it. They can't find it. It was misplaced or taken, or somebody on the scene took it away. So we have really shoddy police work there when a key piece of evidence has gone unfound. Meanwhile, we also know that the police are on the Skakel's payroll. They are being paid by the Skakels. Literally, they are working for the Skakels, taking the kids on rides, maybe dropping them off, providing extra security for the family, and most likely getting the boys out of trouble all the time when the boys were in trouble, which was quite a bit, right? So we have some kind of deception there. Also, if the Neptune in the 10th describes the police, they could have been very confused and befuddled in regard to this. For instance, got to remember they never did, or they had very little experience with a homicide investigation, right? And also, well, quite frankly, they could have been drunk. They could have been intoxicated. I mean, why else? I mean, you have to be drunk in order to let a prime suspect's family conduct a search. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Like, you'd have to be drunk or incredibly stupid or just outwardly deceptive and trying to make sure you're protecting the Skakels. Yes, conveniently lost by the police. Conveniently lost by the police. So it's interesting, right? Obviously, there's some kind of deception going on. Maybe they're even drunk, right? Maybe they're even drunk dealing with this. Yeah, I mean, they actually say in the police report, you know, Julie and Mr. Skakel are going to search the findings more thoroughly, and they're going to get back to us. Are you kidding me? I mean, even if you haven't conducted a homicide investigation, I mean, common sense is going to have you not let the victim's family handle the search. And why wouldn't you get a search warrant? And the 10th house also rules the public perception of the case. The crime was very confusing to the public, for sure. For sure. So what else do we have here? Well, we also have this north node. Now, you got to look at the north node because that's the direction of where things are going. And we also have, you know, we get three energies that are very strong. We get the sun, which rules the victim, which rules the perpetrator. You got Uranus, which rules the victim here. And those are both in the 10th house, the 9th house, along with the north node. So that north node is really, really important. 9th house is key. Now, the 9th house pertains to the higher mind. So we were thinking about things from a broader perspective, even from a legal perspective in the 9th house. So that 9th house is really key. And the south node, opposite the north node, is where the case is coming from, right? It's like the history, the background, and you got its origins there too in the south node, which pertains to siblings, neighborhood, communications, and really key to the case is 9th house. So with the 9th house being key to the case with the north node there, it says to me that key to this case is looking at things from a broader perspective, even a legal perspective, i.e., say one person involved in the case, one suspect is older. Well, it would kind of be better for if you got two people, say you get two family members that are suspects in a case, wouldn't it be safer to make the younger one take the fall because he won't be tried as an adult? And there are 2 years between these boys. So that could have been the case. I don't know if these kids had the wherewithal to be sort of like, oh, geez, I better take care of this situation, but you got to take the fall for it because you're younger and you're not going to get in as much trouble, even afterwards, right? Because, you know, when they're trying the case, they could say, okay, well, this kid was 15, right? So I think that's really, really interesting. From a legal lens, if you want to cover your ass, well, yeah, if two people are involved in a crime, you're going to want the younger one to be prosecuted because he's going to take less of a sentence and he's going to have less culpability, right? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So in addition, and good point, Sonia, in addition to the police being on the Skakel payroll, we also have the Kennedys here, right? So that 9th house might also have to do with that. I mean, it's interesting. The 9th house is about mentoring. It is about authority. So who's to say? Could the father? I don't think the father did this. I think the father, quite frankly, was too drunk and just very, very negligent. But could he have informed like how this needs to be handled? I doubt it. I doubt that Mr. Skakel or Skakel Sr. knew about the death or knew about the murder if one of his sons confessed. I doubt that was the case. But it's interesting with that 9th house that's really key to this case. So if anybody has any ideas about that 9th house and why it's so prominent in this chart, I would love to hear about it. Because that 9th house it's really interesting, right? So as we were talking about in the beginning, sometimes in these cases, We saw this with the Diane Downs case when she essentially was lying through her teeth, obviously, but her recollection or her lies did allude to perhaps past trauma. So even when you're lying, there might be some kind of truth in the lie. So let's look at this, essentially what Tommy had said after he said goodnight to Martha Moxley. Incidentally, at Martha's funeral, Tommy allegedly goes up to Mrs. Moxley, Martha's mother, hugs her, and says, I feel something to the effect of, I feel really bad. If I had walked Martha home that night, maybe this wouldn't have happened. So he says that. And he goes there. He goes to the funeral. Now, according to the Sutton report, Tommy is really good at lying. Like, he's a formidable liar, really, really good at it. In fact, so good that he can throw off a polygraph. So they saw him as really, really good at misrepresenting himself. But let's look at Tommy's statement and see if we can ascertain any truth in this lie, if there is one. Tommy said after he had said goodnight to Martha Moxley that he had gone inside, given his sister's keys to Andrea Shakespeare. Andrea Shakespeare is one of his sister's friends, and sat a while with Ken Littleton watching The French Connection. Now, let's just stop there for a second. I don't know if you've ever seen The French Connection, but what it's known for is its amazing camera work and cinematography due to a chase scene. And what does it look like, according to police, in this crime investigation? Well, it looks like Martha was chased. So it's interesting that Tommy says that he was watching specifically the chase scene in The French Connection, which lasts about 7 minutes, which was another issue because that was Tommy's alibi. I was watching The French Connection with Ken Littleton, so I didn't kill her, ostensibly, right? So that's interesting. I think that's interesting that Tommy says that he's watching The French Connection chase scene when police believe, or the evidence points to, Martha having been chased. So that's interesting, right? Then he asked Littleton if he wanted anything from the kitchen. So Tommy says that he asked Littleton if he wants anything from the kitchen, and then Tommy says that he retreated to his bedroom to work on a report that Mrs. Train would be expecting soon on Abraham Lincoln. So this is really this is where Tommy's not smart at all. He was a terrible student, and it wasn't even a school night. So even a perpetual student is probably going to not do homework the night before you have a day off from school. Tommy would never do that. Tommy was a terrible student, awful. So they actually tracked down the teacher, Tommy's teacher at the time, and she's flummoxed. She says in regard to Tommy saying that he had a report on Abraham Lincoln for her class, she says, quote, "The thing I never understand. I was told he was doing a paper on Abraham Lincoln for me, and that's why he couldn't have killed the girl." The teacher goes on to say, well, I taught him anthropology. We weren't looking too hard at Abraham Lincoln. So Tommy's lies, why lie? Obviously, you know something. Why lie? And why? And then when he describes this, and actually you can find this in the Sutton report, he actually speaks in 15 or like 5 to 10, 15-minute increments. I did this, I did this, I did this. Like he knows exactly what he's doing. So he's clearly covering something up, right? But what's interesting, now let's look at the truth and the lie. Tommy is in an anthropology class with Mrs. Train, but yet he says that he's doing a report on Abraham Lincoln and log cabins, which would be history. So what's interesting here is that Tommy is confusing the subject of history, which is the subject of past events, the study of past events, and anthropology, which is the study of people and cultures, right? Obviously, there's a correlation between history and anthropology, but there's not really much of a focus on Abraham Lincoln. So Tommy is conflating the past history with the study of humanity or human nature, right? And the study of people. So there's something in which history is being conflated with the study of people. So there's a link between history and perhaps the present, right? So there might be something there. There might be something in terms of this hearkening back to a previous incident, perhaps. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's really, really interesting that he would conflate history with anthropology. So he's lying, and he's lying, but he's not even able to get his class correct. And, obviously he's not too bright because he didn't, he didn't have any report. So anyway, if anybody has any ideas as to how Abraham Lincoln, like where did he pull that from? Because Abraham Lincoln's known for emancipation, right? So if anybody has any ideas as to how Abraham Lincoln, in regard to this case, links, I'd love to hear it. Because there's a reason. I think that with statements, it's almost like a dream, right? If you see something in your dream or you hear something with your dream, it has significance. Because the dream, right? A dream, it's sort of analogous to a daydream, right? You don't just lick it up off the floor. There's something there. So even in statements that are obviously lies, there is something to be looked at. So I encourage you, if you're looking at true crime cases and you're seeing these statements, look at the lies. What is the lie actually revealing about the truth, right? So if anybody has any idea about Abe and how that pertains to this case, I mean, emancipation, freedom, keeping your freedom, implicating somebody else, I'm not sure. So the prosecution, as we had said, believes that Michael and Tommy both like Martha. Michael was furious when he saw her kissing Tommy. He goes to a party, gets really drunk, returns from the party. Martha's leaving his house. He gets a golf club from his mother's set, follows her. Prosecution believes that he first hit her on the driveway as she walked toward her home. Martha's blood was found in the driveway. It was their case that he then dragged her to her lawn under a tree and viciously hit her with the golf club. He was so forceful that it broke into pieces, and one blow was so piercing that Martha's hair was dragged through one side of her neck to the other side. So, this is the prosecution's case. I wonder if we can break this apart a bit in the sense that the prosecution says that it was their case that he dragged her to the lawn under a tree and then gave that final blow. I believe that it's very possible that an amount of time went by between the actual beating of her. So he beats her, he leaves her there right in the middle of the lawn, let's say. And then someone at some point be like, you can't leave her there. Is she really dead? Right? So then someone afterwards, not at that same time, goes back. Remember, caution, Saturn, 7th house, responsibility, overly cautious, or even just cautious, right? So afterwards, my feeling is, like Sonia had said, I believe Sonia said along these lines, that after she was badly beaten, that someone decides to be Saturnian, right, and overly cautious, and hides the body, conceals the body, drags her to under the tree, and then does the final blow. Because, again, the autopsy reports, because there was blood in her lungs, that with that blow to the neck, she was still alive. So I believe there was time between the frenzied killing, because that's what the criminologists say. This was frenzied. But Saturn, again, in that 7th house, is not frenzied. It's the exact opposite of frenzied. So yes, she may have been beaten in a frenzy, right? But with Saturn there in the 7th, her actual death was very controlled. That's my feeling. Yeah. Is a dream something that can happen or something that already happened? A dream, I think it. I mean, it could happen. It has happened. It could be anything, right? But they say, like in a dream, for instance, when your subconscious is creating these symbols in your dream, everything means something. You know, you don't have a yellow pillow in your dream for no reason. There's a symbolism that's attached to that yellow pillow that your subconscious has conjured up. Likewise, when you're lying, you have to use your imagination. So if I use a yellow pillow in my lie, that is significant on some level, if only to my own subconscious mind, right? So the dad, I don't know. I mean, I think that the dad obviously went through great pains to protect his children. But again, you got to remember, dad's actively drinking. It's very easy to deny the truth when you're drinking. And same thing for the cops, for that matter. I mean, I don't know how you can sleep at night knowing who most likely killed somebody and covering it up. I mean, how do you look in the mirror? Well, you can very easily because you're in denial. So I think the father is probably in a tremendous amount of pain. I'm not suggesting that, like, you know, we hear about these families, oh, everything went to hell once the mother died. Well, sure, I'm sure that Mrs. Skakel's death did not make matters better in the family, but let's not shit ourselves. That home was probably not great and perfect when Mrs. Skakel was alive. It just wasn't. It can't be. It's impossible. Because again, if there was a certain level of harmony and health and functionality within that home, they would have been able to handle, excuse me, the death of Mrs. Skakel in such a way that it didn't result in stuff like this, crime, right? So anyway, let's talk about some questions here. What do you guys think? What do you guys, because I don't know. I'm speculating just like you all. That Saturn is what just makes me come up with my working theory. So what do you think? Who killed Martha Moxley? Any ideas here? Any people want to wager a guess? I think that with Saturn, there one person technically killed Martha Moxley. And it was a controlled blow that actually killed her, the one that went to the neck, perhaps, right? So one person did. Did anybody have any ideas? Let's see here. After hearing everything, it's got to be between Michael and Tommy, and I'm now leaning toward Tommy. Okay. Yeah. I think that it makes perfect sense. I mean, again, the jealousy makes a lot of sense because I mean, if anybody's ever gotten jealous, well, it is quite a powerful emotion, now isn't it? And then add alcohol and drugs to a jealous person, and not just a jealous person, not even a jealous adult, a jealous 15-year-old kid whose mother had passed away. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Jealousy can make you crazy, especially if you're drinking, especially if you're on drugs, especially if you're 15 years old, already messed up with a history of impulse control and a mother who has passed away. So it does make sense that jealousy could be a motive for Michael, 100%. But also, conceivably, you know, Tommy was the last person to see her alive, right? So we have a diary entry, or not even a diary entry. We have witnesses that say there was an incident in which in the car before Martha's death, she's sitting on Tommy's lap and he keeps putting his hand, Tommy, older brother, keeps putting his hand on her knee and she keeps moving it away, which is found in testimony, right? People who were in the car. So it's very possible that outside of the jealousy theory, Tommy was expecting, remember, Tommy is roughhousing with Martha. Both of them had been drinking. Martha did like beer. It's very possible that in roughhousing when Tommy's roughhousing with Martha, he wants to go further, and she says no. She's like, I'm not doing this. I want to go home. It's very possible in that instance, Tommy does not like being told no. Tommy and Michael are both wingnuts. I mean, let's not forget that both of them have a history of lack of impulse control, and both of them, Tommy in particular, has been accused of being absolutely terrifyingly scary. There's a report that Tommy allegedly, somebody said something when he was younger in like a schoolyard setting or whatever. Somebody said something and it wasn't even that bad. And Tommy goes after his neck and starts strangling him. And it took, I think, 4 teachers to get Tommy off of this guy because he was going to kill him. And that's what these teachers, this one teacher said. So Tommy, it's not out of the question that a no could infuriate Tommy. Again, remember, Tommy allegedly was in a car accident. He was flung from a car at 4 years old, resulting in a brain injury that made him very volatile and also not able to maintain impulse control, right? That's what I meant, Casmar. I don't think he meant final blows. Yeah. Boom her. Both boys participated. I agree. They went and got the sister who made the final. Oh, the sister? You think the sister made the final strike? Sweet Julie? Poor Julie, who was entrusted with being the surrogate mother for these boys when she's already only a child herself? Poor Julie. Poor Julie dealing with this. You know? So you really think that Julie could be capable of murder to protect her brothers? That's very interesting. It would seem as if Julie's whereabouts are accounted for, but maybe, again, this is 1975. They're not going to probably, especially if she's a Skakel, believe a woman would commit a crime like this, just like with the Lizzie Borden case. I mean, this was a lot further back, the Lizzie Borden case in the late 1800s, but the main issue with Lizzie Borden getting off was a woman couldn't do this. A woman? So who knows? Maybe in 1975 it was similar, but I had never heard that Julie actually was involved in the actual murder. That would be very surprising to me, but hey, we do have that Venus in the 8th house, so who knows? They damn sure are not used to being told no. Very true. Thank you, AAS. So, yeah, Tommy could have gotten a no. And again, you've got to remember, Tommy and Martha are drinking, and they've had a lot of drinks, and she's 15, and he's 17. And it's just, it's very interesting. I mean, your hormones are raging at that time, right? And I would think for a girl at 15 years old, you have an existential dilemma in the sense that you have your hormones. Tommy is obviously a very attractive kid, right? And he's very, very passionate. So she's finding him engaging, and it's an issue, right? So like her morals, I have to be a good girl and not put out, but yet at the same time, she likes engaging with Tommy, obviously, because she is. So it's this weird time of like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation of, well, I want to do this, but I can't, especially sexually, right? I mean, that's kind of common. Like, oh, I really want this person, but I don't know, X, Y, B, or Z reasons why I shouldn't go all the way with them. So if she is having that dilemma, and Tommy thinks that he's going to get with her, and Tommy has a brain injury. Very possible. Talking about Julie, she was the matriarch. Any failure of the children is the woman's responsibility. Very possible. I mean, the fact that, she did answer the phone, and she did lead for whatever reason. When Mrs. Moxley wound up calling their house and looking for Martha, she tells them, well, you might want to talk to the Tierans. So she gives them the cousin's number. So could that be her being like, let's get them away from us, like get them to the cousins. We don't want them here, right? It's very possible. But you got to remember too that most likely in the case of this crime, there were bloody clothes, right? I don't think that level of violence could be committed without there being blood evidence on the perpetrator, right? So at some point, whoever did this had to clean their clothes. I mean, they did live in a huge house, so I guess one of the Skakel boys could have ran laundry without anybody knowing, but is that really possible? Or both? Could they have run laundry? Of course, we had no search warrant. They didn't take the case seriously because the police were working for the Skakels and completely incompetent. So it would be interesting if they had done a search warrant for that house. I mean, as soon as they knew that Tommy was the last person to see her alive, she was last seen with Tommy. I mean, wouldn't you run a search, get a search warrant for Tommy's house immediately, right? Not if you're a Skakel, not if they're a Skakel, right? So it's very, very possible. Very possible. And again, it is the family. I mean, talk about arrested development too. I mean, you're the father in the family is drinking, the mother is no longer there. I mean, who's to say where your head is at or what you deem to be honorable or the right thing to do? Yeah. Other questions. Should the case be reopened and how should police proceed? Now, Michael's off the table, by the way. He ain't going to get tried again. Tommy, however, could be, right? As well as anybody else, right? Even Ken Littleton. I don't think Ken did it, but I think Ken knows something. Clearly, Ken knows something, right? According to our Sutton report. So what do you think? Do you think the case should be reopened, and how should police proceed with this case? I mean, it's a little bit tough, right? At the same time, there's no statute of limitations for murder. We have double jeopardy, of course. But we got no statute of limitations for murder. So it could conceivably be reopened and anybody could be tried. Martha and her family deserves justice, so yes, it should be reopened. I agree. Let's reopen this case, right? And the fact that, Michael gets off, I mean, so the Kennedy guy, Robert F. Kennedy, he was very involved in protecting Michael. So Robert Kennedy, he wrote a book called Framed, in which he alleges that the two black dudes that were really, really big and strong infiltrated the whiter than white Bellhaven community on the night before Halloween, where there are police more than any other night outside of Halloween, perhaps, because of all the commotion that's going on. Robert F. Kennedy, who you would think is an intelligent man, proffers that these big black dudes come into Bellhaven, Connecticut, the richest area in the United States, and one of the richest communities, and kills this girl? That is completely asinine. And it really speaks about grasping for straws. So Robert Kennedy went out of his way to push that theory. I guess the Littleton theory didn't work, but they did everything that they could. But that was for Michael. Now, I do wonder if Robert F. Kennedy knows the truth and knows that, yeah, Michael was involved, but he didn't actually do it. And that might have been what pushed Robert F. Kennedy to potentially protect Michael, because he knew that Michael didn't really do it. That kind of makes me feel better, that Robert would do that and go out of his way, because he knows that Michael's not the actual perpetrator. That could be. Robert Kennedy is a Capricorn, and he also has a Cancerian moon. So there's that balance between maintaining that level of status, Capricorn, but also protecting the family. And it is kind of amazing, actually, that Robert F. Kennedy really put his neck out for Michael Skakel, since Michael Skakel was at one point penning a tell-all book about the Kennedys. And also, I believe Michael did something involving some kind of affair. In any case, Michael Skakel was not a fan of the Kennedys. He trash-talked them quite a bit. Yet, Robert Kennedy did still go to his defense, which calls into question, why would Robert Kennedy go to his defense unless the Skakels had some information on Kennedy and there was this thing going on, you better make sure that my son's okay, otherwise we're going to let this cat out of the bag? Possible. I mean, it's all conjecture, obviously. The Kennedys have gotten away with murder on more than one occasion. Well, yeah. I mean, they have. I mean, for instance, even with the William Kennedy Smith case in 1991, he's accused of rape. Now, the lady who accuses him of rape, to me, did not seem credible at all. And in fact, when they both take the stand in the William Kennedy Smith trial in 91, I mean, without a doubt, William Smith Kennedy looks way more believable than the woman who alleged rape. However, after this, we have several other accusations of rape on this guy. I mean, and all of these women were afraid to come forth because he was a Kennedy. So what the hell? I mean, I thought, looking at that case and looking at the trial, which was televised later on, at first they had a blob over her face to protect her privacy. And then now you can actually see the trial online and you can actually look at her. She does not seem credible to me at all. However, I then found out that several other women state that he did this, or alleged that he did this. I mean, is one person going to get accused of rape that many times and be completely innocent? I don't know. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Let's see here. They cover for family and go along with lies. Cass is right again. Lots of murders in that family. Thank you, Sonia. Really good point. Really good point. Yeah. I mean, who's to know? Who's to say? I mean, again, he may have been covering his own ass too. He's like, you better, who knows? Mr. Skakel, outside of his like drinking and, covering for his sons, he was a very gregarious guy. I mean, he was a Libra, I believe, but he must have had some Sagittarius in his chart, because he's described as jovial and happy-go-lucky and always laughing, right? Or good-spirited man, a good man in a lot of ways. So it's very possible that in pure Sagittarius fashion, he's like, let's just be direct. You got to protect Michael or this person or that person, whichever one, or sorry, but we're going to do this. We're going to tell them about this. I mean, that's possible too. Yeah. So the case should be reopened, somebody says. Okay. And I guess I also want to know, should someone's brain injury, so let's just say, who knows, maybe say Tommy did indeed do this. Say he's responsible for her death. But there was a brain injury when he was 4 years old, in which he was thrown from a car, resulting in impulsivity issues, a lack of impulse control. And I mean, this excuse, and really it's interesting, but whenever I hear about these excuses, oh, he was hit in the head and he's never been the same since, a part of me just, I don't like using that as an excuse. It just seems like a lie, right? Or it seems like a justification, but this is pretty well documented. So my question to you is, if somebody has a brain injury, especially underage at the time, does that make them less culpable for a murder? If somebody has a brain injury, I mean, they're not mentally ill, right? Because they're obviously going through great length to cover up the crime and to lie and to cover their tracks, etc. So my son had a TBI when he was 4. He had serious impulse issues and has never raped or killed anyone. So no. Thank you, Boom Her, especially for sharing that. Yeah, I think to your point, hearing that, it makes me think that, there's never just one factor. Do you know what I mean? It's never just one. You're never just, you have a brain injury and then you commit murder and rape. No, I mean, there are other factors that are involved. And as somebody had said in the chat, these boys were not told no much, right? There was no discipline. And they had money at their disposal, unlimited funds, from what I gather. So when you have money, a lot of money, you get what you want. There's not no in your language, right? So that's interesting. So there's a few different things. Well, his past behavior, in terms of Tommy's past behavior, I mean, he was dangerous. Like I told you about that example when he, another kid in class, I guess, said something, and it was really innocuous. It wasn't a big deal at all. Tommy just went off. He was completely triggered, and it took 4 guys to get him off of this other guy, and he was going to strangle him. And the witnesses say that they thought Tommy was going to kill him, right? So his past behavior is definitely not on his side in regard to this, right? Of course, it's not an excuse to murder. Yeah, but shouldn't we? Like, hey, by all means, use your defense. Like, if this case is reopened, well, yeah, I want to know what the defense has to say. Is there a reason why this should be justifiable? Maybe there's stuff that we don't even know, right? Maybe there's further stuff. So yeah, let them use it to their advantage as long as he's tried. Not that, I mean, I would think that nowadays, but it's really interesting that this has still not been reopened, and that other people of interest have not been seriously investigated and prosecuted. So I'm game for it. I think they should open the case. And I think that, the evidence will show, say they do prosecute. Well, hey, give me evidence that he's not culpable because of a brain injury. I mean, that could make a difference, right? Between manslaughter or first and second degree murder, for sure. So this is another question that's good. If an underage person commits a crime, should they still pay for it 48 years after? And to what extent? Should they be tried as an adult because they kept quiet for the crime for so long? 48 years ago, this crime happened. Now, just to let you know that if they do decide to prosecute again, 48 years has passed. And obviously, the Moxleys don't want to necessarily relive this again, right? Could be opening up a lot of wounds. So, do you think that they should just leave well enough alone? Let's not drudge things up. Let her rest in peace. Or do you think it's more important that justice be served and that whoever killed Martha Moxley pays for it? Yes, the family still pays for it. If someone is that much of a danger that they cannot help but kill people, then perhaps they should not be free amongst the innocent. Justice should not be gained by innocent blood. Well, that's another interesting aspect. I mean, obviously, nothing can justify murder, right? But are either suspects a danger to society? I would think no. From what I gathered, both Skakel boys are, well, they have family, right? They're doing what they can to live their life. I don't think that there's been any other crimes, but I mean, who knows? I mean, this one was covered up clearly, right? So maybe it's one of those things. I mean, I guess on one hand, it could be a matter of that was when they were younger, they were on drugs, they seriously regret it, and they've spent their whole lives making up for it. That could be, but it's interesting. 48 years later, I mean, I wonder if it could cause more harm than good, or do you think that it still needs to be tried? So anybody has any ideas about that? I'd love to hear it. Love to hear it. So yeah, if you have any other insight, please put it in the chat or in the comments. I do appreciate you watching today, and I appreciate you, AAS, for alerting me to this case, because it's phenomenal. It's really a rabbit hole. I'm actually kind of sad to have to drop this case, especially since I'm in the middle of another book. There's a free, if you're on Audible, there's actually a free book that's very expansive. I think it's by this guy by the name of Timothy. The Audible sticker is in the way. Let's see what his name is. The Audible sticker is in the way. It's Timothy Dillon, maybe? I don't know. But if you're on Audible, you'll be able to get actually a free book called Greentown, which is very in-depth. And this guy waxes on philosophic, and he's very long-winded, but it's still excellent. So if you got some time, if you're not looking for a quick rundown, if you're looking for a quicker book, you could always read Furman's book because he wrote on the case as well. Thank you for doing it. I learned so much I didn't know, and thanks for the book tip. My suspect list has changed, and God bless you. Hey, Sin, nice to see you. Oh, I'm glad you'll watch it again, and I hope your doctor's appointment went well. So thank you all for joining me. If you have any comments, questions, ideas, I'd love to hear them below. And, you know, talking about these cases, it's important to remember that, you know, this is something that's very, very tragic for everybody. So in addition to, you know, how we are, you know, in a lot of ways glamorizing crime, you know, the whole point of studying crime from my perspective is to heal, right? To heal the past, to help heal the people that are involved, and to also shed a light on stuff like this so that it doesn't happen again, or that it happens less frequently. So be sure to send lots of love and white light energy to everybody involved, right? That doesn't mean that people need to be condoned or that they're not punished, but send lots of love, you know, to the Moxleys, of course, and the Skakels and anybody involved, because, you know, you want there to be healing. And that really is the name of the game, right? It's the name of what I'm hoping that we're doing here. So take good care, everybody. Please like this video, subscribe to this video, and share the video. I'd really appreciate it. And of course, if you're looking for readings, etc., my link, psychicsun.com, is in the bio below. So have a wonderful day, everybody, and I shall see you next crime. Very exciting.